Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Jessica Devereaux in Baltimore. We're continuing our conversation about Hurricane Katrina 10 years later and how the recovery effort has gone down there in New Orleans. Now joining us from New Orleans is Gary Rivlin. Gary is a former New York Times reporter and he's the author of the book Katrina After the Flood. Thank you for being with us, Gary.
Thank you.
So, Gary, let's talk about who's actually benefiting from this post-Katrina New Orleans. And let's speak specifically about the Black leadership and that establishment class. Are their interests and the interests of everyday working class people matching up here now in this post-Katrina New Orleans?
Well, there were some really interesting tensions in the months and years after Katrina. I think a lot of people look at the Black community as if it's a monolith, but of course you have well-off folks and people who aren't as well off. And so one touch point, one flashpoint was Section 8 housing. The New Orleans East, a well-off community, became a dumping ground for the city to put its Section 8 subsidized housing. And so after Katrina, a lot of the Black middle class saw it as their opportunity to make sure that the Section 8 housing, the subsidized housing, didn't come back. Public housing itself, that was another issue that really split the Black community. So in New Orleans, they call it the Big Four. There are 4 big housing projects. Don't imagine tall buildings. There are 3 or 4 story buildings that just scattered over blocks. And the shame was that they didn't all have to be knocked down. Much of the Big Four survived the storm with only minimal damage, but they were never reopened. And they were knocked down and replaced with mixed income. So 1/3 of the residents of each of these projects are the traditional low-income housing project residents. But another third is middle income, and the final third is market rate. And so the third that are living there love it. It has all sorts of amenities. It's brand new. But there's a waiting list right now of 18,000 people waiting for public housing or Section 8 vouchers. And they closed that list in like 2012 because it was getting too long. They estimate there'd be 50,000 people. I mean, after a storm like this with 80% of the city covered in water, housing became at a premium, so rents soared. There's a real crying need for affordable housing here. But what you saw among the white and Black leadership alike is this is our opportunity to get rid of public housing. And in fact, that has happened.
And those who are relying on public housing, Gary, where did they end up going?
Well, today there are 100,000 less African Americans living in New Orleans than there were at the time of Katrina. And it was only a city of 455,000 at the time. Many of them are still in Houston or Atlanta, wherever they ended up. Some are here and struggling. Some are out in the suburbs and now are 2 or 3 buses, from getting downtown to their jobs. It's been a real problem here. New Orleans used to be home to the oldest public hospital in the United States. It never reopened after Katrina. Charity Hospital never reopened. The governor at the time, Kathleen Blanco, a moderate Democrat, didn't want that hospital to reopen and, in fact, fought FEMA. FEMA said, it wasn't that badly damaged. Why don't you just rebuild it? She fought it, and New Orleans no longer has a public hospital. Again, something that thwarted, something that got in the way of everyday people coming back, those who didn't have health insurance, those who needed some kind of health care system to know they could come back and be healthy, be safe.
Okay, let's talk about what policies should have been put in place if policy was in the interest of everyday people. What could have the political leadership have done differently to build New Orleans back better and work on the staggering poverty rate?
Right. So, let's start with a road home program that was based on the cost of rebuilding. The idea of road home was like, we need to help people rebuild. This was a catastrophe that not only devastated people, it was a man-made catastrophe. We're commemorating not really a hurricane 10 years ago in New Orleans. We're commemorating a flood. It was a man-made levee system that failed. Half of the 350-mile system collapsed after Katrina. It was rated to withstand a Category 3 hurricane. It was a Category 3 hurricane. It's in large part the fault of the Army Corps of Engineers, and they've admitted that. And so there was this sense like we need to help people rebuild. But the whole basis of Road Home wasn't on the cost of rebuilding. Instead, it was based on the appraised value. It compounded the disaster.
Okay, let's talk about what, let's say, if there was to be another hurricane, another flood, like you said, another disaster, do you see the city being better prepared? And are those communities that were so vulnerable at the time that the flood took place, are they in a better position now?
Right. So a lot of the issue back at the time of Katrina was the mayor gave a mandatory evacuation order, but 1 in 4 people in New Orleans didn't own a car. There was no plan to help people like, oh, maybe we should run buses, maybe we should run trains. In fact, there's the famous phantom trains. 5 Amtrak trains left New Orleans that Sunday, right before the storm, empty. Totally empty. And so what happened is people were on their own. Maybe they could beg a ride from a neighbor or a relative, but for the most part, people were on their own, and they ended up at the Superdome where they were trapped for 5 days. The city flooded on a Monday. It wasn't until Friday, day 5, that the buses started showing up en masse. Now there's a plan to help people get out. The second thing is, the good news is, there's a much stronger flood protection system. The federal government spent nearly $15 billion to rebuild the city's flood protection system, and it's much more secure than it was at the time of Katrina. The flip side of that, though, is coastal erosion. The best buffer against the storm surge is the natural coastline. And New Orleans has been losing, southern Louisiana has been losing 25 to 30 square miles of coastline a year. And what that means is the water, the Gulf of Mexico, is that much closer. You could build the best flood protection system in the world, but unless you stop the erosion of the coastal wetlands, the water's going to be right here. There's nothing could hold it back. So right now, New Orleans is safer, but in a few decades, the $15 billion system they have is going to be obsolete unless there's more done to protect the coastal waters.
All right, Gary Rivlin joining us from New Orleans. I certainly learned a lot during this interview. I hope our viewers did as well. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.